Pubs and gaming go together like fish and chips, or maybe more accurately, like beer and pretzels. In the 19th century, folks took an old game played by the aristocracy, used common everyday coins, and merged everything into a game that persists even into the modern day. So pull up a chair, grab a pint, and join me as we learn how to play and talk about a pub game from 19th century England, Shove a Penny, here at the Raven's Table. So, Shove a Penny is a skill-based game that emerged in England in the 19th century. The name is descriptive in that players literally will shove or push halfpenny coins down the board, with the goal being to have them stop within one of the scoring areas. You might also hear the game referred to as shove groat, because a groat is another type of coin from the era. Shove a Penny is an evolution of an older game called shoveboard or shovelboard. This older version was played in the Tudor era between the 15th and 17th centuries and was very popular with the English upper classes. The game was played on enormous narrow tables up to 30 feet or 9 meters long. Players would shove heavy metal weights down the tables, attempting to get them as near to the other end as possible without falling off. Presumably, this was basically a gamified version of something that nobles deep within their cups would play on their long dining tables after dinner. I mean, who amongst us hasn't come up with a fun game after imbibing a few, right? One of the earliest firm references we have is from the document called The Royal Privy Expenses of 1532, which states that while playing shovelboard, King Henry VIII, yeah, that one, lost £9 to Lord William. And in an amazing display of upper crustery, King Henry and his court could play shoveboard whenever they liked, but he decided that the commoners and soldiers could not, stating that none of the society shall play at the game called shuffboard or slipgroat. Ostensibly, this prohibition was because the games were too distracting and kept people from being productive. I guess that since nobles don't want to punch a clock, it's okay. But in the end, the game fell out of favor with the nobility and made its way from the fancy parlors and into the taverns of the common folk. Given that a tavern wasn't about to take up a large amount of space with a 9-meter gating table, they shrunk it down to a much more tabletop-friendly version, and the heavy, plate-sized game pieces morphed into the common coins of the day, namely halfpennies. As far as I could find, Shove a Penny as an organized and codified game came into existence around 1840, and would originally have been played on any flat surface that would have the requisite lines inscribed upon it. But eventually, purpose-built boards were created out of slate or hardwood with engraved lines defining the scoring beds. The more expensive boards would be built with hinged rails embedded in the board that can be lifted out of the slots to determine whether a coin was completely within a scoring bed or not. Basically, if the coin moved, it didn't score. Shove a Penny never really left English pubs since then, with leagues and formal tournaments still in existence to this very day. And I know some of you are thinking that all of this sounds really familiar, much like the modern game of shuffleboard. Well, you would be correct. Shuffleboard is a direct descendant of this family of games. So now, let's have some fun and learn how to play Shove a Penny. Okay, so before we get into how to play Shove a Penny, I'm going to start off with my usual disclaimer. So as is the case with many things historical, game rules aren't always set in stone. Given this game has been played for such a long time, there are numerous rule sets out there, all of which can be fun. But it is important that you agree ahead of time under which rules you'll be playing. The version I'm going to show you today is one rule set, but I encourage you to try others because that's one of the things that I think is fun about historical gaming, is that you can play, the game can be different in small or big ways depending on what rules you're playing under. So this is a pretty standard Shove a Penny board. Made this one myself. You can see you've got these horizontal areas marked 1 through 9. You've got these areas here on the side that are marked with slate, and then you've got a brass-covered backstop in the back. And then you have these are actual British halfpennies. These are, this one happens to have King George VI on it, and I've got other ones on here with Queen Elizabeth II on there. So these are about 1 inch in diameter, maybe a little bit more. But you can play this game with, U.S. quarters or maybe like Canadian loonies or toonies. Just you want to know that the bed sizes will change based on the coin that you're playing with. So you can see that here there's a little bit of room on both sides, but if you were to play with a US quarter, it becomes a little bit easier with this specific board because the quarter is a little bit smaller than this. But if you play with like a larger coin, like say a $50, I don't know that it would even fit in there. So just for the leagues that exist for this game, they're very strict about how wide these spaces are. In fact, this board is made to modern standards. But if you want to make the game a little bit easier, and say you're playing with US quarters, make the beds a little bit wider because it's easier to make it inside there. Because when you're playing this game, you score by getting the coins into the bed without intersecting the line. If it goes over a line, it doesn't count. So how do we play? Well, you start off, no scoring on the sides here, and you're going to take your coins and you're going to overlap or over the side like this a little bit, and you're going to tap the coin such that it goes careening down the board. If this was a game in a pub, usually they're up against a wall and people will take the heel of their hand and kind of go and shove it like that. But with these tabletop versions, the board is so light it would go all over the place. So usually I'll just like take it and like flick it with the back of my fingers, or some people may do this. It's however you like. As long as it's a tap and not, you don't push it like this. So you're going to take this coin and, like I said, just kind of tap it down the line. And you don't check your scoring until you've cast all 5 down. Okay. So there's 1, 2. Oops. If you hit it and it doesn't go over the first line, you get to actually go over again. 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so one other thing, if you happen to take a coin and you hit it so hard that it hits the back and then comes back into the scoring area, that's perfectly fine. In fact, some people you may want to do that if like a coin, you want to knock it backwards a little bit, you can cause it to careen off the back and come back into the scoring area. But we've cast all of our coins. Now we check our scoring. And like I said, they only count if it's completely within the bed. So in this case, you can see that this one doesn't count, this one doesn't count, and this one doesn't count. That one is completely within the bed. It's pretty easy to tell. This one actually looks like it's completely within the bed, but it doesn't count because you're outside the scoring. You've overlapped the outside line over here. So in this case, we've gotten 1 point instead of 6. So you're going to take your chalk here and you're going to make a mark to say, okay, I got one point there. The objective is to get 3 points in each one of these beds, and the way I mark that is I'll say, okay, there's 1 point, there's 2 points, and then the third point is that, and it's now closed out. You can also go 1, 2, 3. However you like it. It doesn't really matter. Just know that you're shooting for 3 points. So in this case, I got 1. And now the play would pass on to the second player. Before we do that, I want to show you something real quick. So how do you know if like the coin is like right there on the edge? Is it actually overlapping the line? Well, in the fancy boards, like I mentioned in the introduction, they have these hinged brass rails that are embedded inside of here, and you would lift up one side of it. It's on the hinge on this side. And if the act of lifting the rail out causes the coin to move, you know it was intersecting the line and it doesn't count. Well, I don't have the skill to make something like that yet, so what I did is these grooves are exactly the thickness of one of these coins. So you take it and you run it down the groove, and if it moves the coin, so obviously it moved that one, so that one's no good. But in this case, let's see what happens now. Oh, the coin moved a little bit, so it was intersecting the line and doesn't count anymore. So, but in this case, we know that the player 1 got a 6, and it's now going to pass to player 2. One other interesting little historical tidbit. It's traditional to play this game with the monarch's head facing up. That's because in British history, at various times, it was actually illegal to deface any image of the British crown. So if you play this game for a long time with a set of coins, the side that's running along this board becomes very worn down and very smooth. So you wouldn't want to deface the head of the crown. But whereas some pubs that were, let's say, have a more rebellious bent would actually play with the tails up because they didn't particularly care what the crown thought. So let's say, player 1 was playing with the heads up, player 2 is going to play, they're a little bit more rebellious, so they're going to play with tails. So now it's player 2's turn. So same thing as before. 1, 2, oh, that one's good. 3, 4, ooh, almost knocked it out. 5, okay. So we got player 2, got 1 and the 3. Player 1. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, nothing in that one, which, by the way, if you... This game's got its own terminology, just like other games do. If you cast all 5 down and you get no points on it, that's called... You scored a 19, which is kind of a interesting thing, but it shares that term with cribbage, because in cribbage, if you score nothing, 19 is an impossible score, because basically you scored nothing and got 0. And the kind of the other side of that is if you cast all 5 down and you scored 5 points, then you got the gold watch, or sometimes it's called the Virgin Mary. A couple other terms: if you have a coin and you hit it to the point where, like, say this one right here, if you hit it to the point where you kind of nudge it into being a good coin or a good score, that's called a tickle. You've tickled that coin. And another one where if you take a penny and you hit a coin, and then that coin goes off, hits another one, and then that one becomes a score, that's called a cannon. You can kind of see where you're shooting a cannon, boom, you hit it. So interesting little terms. But that's it in a nutshell. You go back and forth, and the first person to close out, meaning 1, 2, 3, on all the beds, all 9 beds, is the winner. So that is Shove-a-Penny in a nutshell. Alright, so let's talk about some variations. So this game has so many variations, there's no way I could cover them all, but I've picked some of the more interesting ones, and the ones that I've played, and I think they're pretty fun. So first of all, this is a pub game, and in pubs you play drinking games, so there are drinking rules for this game. What I've seen is whenever you play this game, and once a player reaches 3 points in a bed, and they've closed it out, the other player has to take as many drinks as they were behind on points. So if, let's say, the other player only had 1, there's a difference of 2 between 1 and 3, so they would have to take 2 drinks. And then at the end of the game, the losing player must take a drink for every incomplete bed. So let's say player 1 got all 9, obviously, because they won, but let's say player 2 only closed out 7 beds total. Then they'd have to take 2 drinks because they were too short of winning. Okay. So a pretty common variation, I showed you before, when I talked to you about this before, the winner is the one who closed out all 9 beds. You can also play a shorter version of it, which is you play until all 9 beds are closed out between the 2 players, and whoever has the most closed out wins. Basically it means that the first person to get to 5 beds wins the game, because one person has 5, the other person can only have 4, and that's it. So basically it's the first person who gets to 5 beds wins. Common variation, if you're playing, and let's say, like in this example here, player 1 closed out bed number 4, but let's say that they're playing next, and they shoot and they land another coin inside the 4 after everything is judged. If that happens, so they've landed a coin in the 4 after they closed it out, then they actually lose this bed. They no longer have that one closed out, and the other player gets it. So basically it makes it trickier, because you want to make very sure that you don't land your coins inside of a bed that you've already closed out. That one can make the game change places really fast, because if one person's way ahead but they're not very accurate later in the game, then the other person can actually start getting some beds, and it can make them play catch up, basically. Sometimes you'll play games that are turn limited. So let's say games each player's going to have 10 rounds, and at that point the person who has the most points scored, whether they're partial or complete beds closed out, whoever has the most things closed out after 10 rounds is the winner. Sometimes I've seen people play where they're playing for total score, so you're actually scoring based on these numbers you have in your beds 1 through 9. This one kind of makes it sort of like playing 301 or 501 in modern day darts, Whereas for darts, you start with a number like 301, and then you shoot, and you're subtracting from it. The first person to get to 0 is the winner. Well, in this case, it's kind of the same thing, but you start at 0 and you go up to your number, say 100 or something like that. And the first person to get to that number is the winner. But you'd also, like, if let's say you're at 99 and you only need one more point because you're playing to 100, if you cast and you got, let's say, a 5, you can't go over. You have to hit exactly 100. Well, in that case, you take the 5 and you subtract it from what you were just at, which is 99, which now it takes your score back to 94. So, like I said, you have to get exactly onto that number. There's another version of this game where you play the standard rules that I showed you before, but it's called progressive, meaning that when you cast your coins, you score them as normal. So let's say the first person goes and they've got something like this. So in this case, they've got a 5 and they've got a 7. Well, what that person what the progressive rules allow you to do is the coins that scored, you take all the other ones off and you get those 2, and you get to go. Player 1 gets to go again, and basically you keep playing until you get 0 scores. Which if someone's a really, really skilled player, they could effectively, it is possible to win the game, to close out all 9 beds without play having passed to the second player. It's like almost an impossibility, but you can do it. So just know that if for however many coins you scored with, you get to take that same number and keep playing until you have a cast that you had no scores on. So if you know of any other versions of Shove a Penny that I didn't cover, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you guys think is fun. So that's it for today's look into Shove a Penny. If you look in the video description below, there's a link to a document with instructions on how to play. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future video topics, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear them. Be sure to stay subscribed for more videos looking at gaming history, as well as how you can make your own games and accessories. So until next time, I wish you luck, good beers, and look forward to seeing you again at the Raven's table. Yum.